In 865 AD, the Viking war leader, Ivar the Boneless, began marshalling his forces. His target was York, rich capital of Northumbria, a kingdom in northeastern England. Jonathan is in the city, trying to get an idea of what it would have been like to know that the great army was approaching.
In 866 AD, a whole fleet of Viking ships was spotted on the River Ouse. Now, this is 70 years after their first attack on Lindisfarne, and they were here in number because the rules of the game had now changed. This fleet hadn't just come to mount a raid on the city, it had come to conquer it.
The onslaught was ferocious. York fell, and many of the inhabitants were butchered in the streets. But the cruelty didn't end there.
Ela was one of the rival kings of Northumbria, and his capital was York, so of course he opposed the conquest of Ivar the Boneless. And his dubious reward when caught was to be given the blood eagle. And that meant ripping open his rib cage, pulling out his organs, and then having those exposed ribs displayed like the bloodied wings of an eagle. Now, what kind of a message was that to the people of York? At the least, it was that Vikings were not people to be crossed.
Ivar named his new conquest Jorvik. Standing at the point where two rivers meet, and with access to trading networks across the British Isles and Europe, the Vikings saw York as a great prize. They left their mark here. Jonathan wants to explore the links to the Vikings that survive in the modern city.
Modern York still has many of the street names that the Vikings set here 1,000 years ago. There's Nessgate, the street to the headlands, which records the geography they knew. There's Micklegate, the big street, so that's their experience of the size of the roads that they set down. And then there's Coppergate, the place where they made the cup. So from the geography through to the places they lived and their industry, Viking York is still very much here today.
It was beneath the modern-day street of Coppergate that archaeologists made an extraordinary find. Amazingly, preserved deep in the waterlogged soil, they found evidence of 8 Viking-age houses dating back to the 10th century. Jonathan is at the Jorvik Center, which was literally built around the remains. Here, archaeologist Richard Hall explains their significance.
So Richard, suddenly from no known Viking houses, you had 8 on your hands.
Yeah, very exciting. And most importantly, to find them so very well preserved. Nobody had ever seen anything like it before. Archaeologists were used to finding ghosts of buildings, and here they were sprouting in 3D around us. In some places, buildings standing 1.8 meters tall, best preserved timber buildings from anywhere in the Viking world.
Timbers preserved in the ground provide answers to how this structure was built. First, a cellar was dug to a depth of approximately 7 feet and lined throughout with horizontal oak planks. Then, massive oak uprights were set into the ground at regular intervals. These supported the great sill beams, which were the first part of the superstructure.
But Richard, I don't see any joints or pegs or anything. How does it fit together?
Pressure was keeping this building together. No nails, no pegs, just the pressure of one timber on another.
No metal fixings at all?
That's right. We sometimes see the tool marks, we could see bits of woodworm even on some of them. And if you go up to the top, just up there, you can perhaps see there's a little hole right in the middle of the beam. And we think that's where there was a matching beam on the other side, and there would have been some sort of horizontal holding the two apart and supporting the floor above. So it's a well-known building form. It's very clever, it's very simple.
This sunken lower level was ingenious. It required fewer building materials, and it gave the structure greater strength. From the ground up, oak uprights were slotted into the sill beam, and finally, the thatched roof and planked walls were added. Using the remains of the houses, we can now reveal how Coppergate would have looked during the Viking period. The house plots were carefully laid out along the street. Beneath them, cellar-based workshops provided trade for this thriving new marketplace and center of commerce. The unusual waterlogged conditions at Coppergate also revealed thousands of artifacts, each one providing a unique window into the world of the Vikings.
So Richard, these are your star exhibits.
Well, these are representative of some of the nicest and most complete things that we've got, like this, for example, which is a Viking Age shoe.
Beautifully made. And you can see there, am I looking at the indent or the wear on people's individual toes?
You can work out what corns they had and what bunions they suffered from.
What looks to be a walking stick handle.
Well, this is, if you eat, this is what comes out at the other end. It's strange things that archaeologists collect, but it's full of information. It tells us what they ate. So we learn about Viking Age diet. We found wooden bowls like this, and Coppergate is the street of the cup makers. This is what they're eating their food from. They're very adept at choosing the best wood for the particular job.
Again, masters of wood, weren't they?
This is antler. Antler was, I suppose, the plastic of the Viking Age.
So they didn't waste anything, did they?
No, you made sure that you used your raw materials to the very best possible way and got the most out of it.
Jonathan has been to the Scandinavian homelands, building up a picture of the lost world of the Vikings. But now, in York, he has finally found one of its inhabitants.
Richard, I'm finally face to face with a Viking.
Face to face with an inhabitant of Jorvik 1,000 years ago, but someone who came to a bit of a sticky end, because if you look very carefully at the skeleton, you can see that there are all sorts of little nicks and marks caused by, well, what are known as blade injuries. And so all in all, we think he might be a victim of a battle. And York was a prize that was contended for by many different would-be rulers. And so people in York were used to having to fight to maintain their independence.
Large numbers of skeletons have been discovered with clear signs of battle wounds. The usual culprit was the battle axe. Under Viking rule, Jorvik became a bustling port that was a trade hub of international importance and a stepping stone for further conquest. By the time of his death in 873, Ivar was king of the Northmen of all Ireland and Britain and ruled vast tracts of land. But as Viking conquests were redrawing the map of Europe, in their homelands, a massive upheaval was changing the face of Viking society. Next, our investigators go in search of the first king to unify the Vikings, a man who turned the bloodthirsty and lawless warriors of legend into one people under one god. His name was Harold Bluetooth. Our investigators have explored the Viking homelands and uncovered vast trading networks across Europe and beyond. They've revealed evidence of the Vikings' extraordinary skill in shipbuilding and seafaring. Now, they're in the heart of Denmark. In Roskilde, Helena is on the trail of Harold Bluetooth, a 10th century Viking chieftain who united Denmark and later became king of Norway. Harold was a stereotypical Viking, tall, tough, and battle-hardened. But he was also a man with an inner conflict. Although his roots were pagan, Harold converted to Christianity. To enforce his vision of united and Christian Denmark, he ordered the construction of a series of circular encampments, known as ring fortresses, to subdue the warring Viking tribes. Four of these sites, built with geometrical precision, have now been firmly identified by archaeologists. Helena has come to one of these sites at Trelleborg to try and piece together how they were constructed. With her is Mads Turnu, an expert on how the ring fortresses were built.
The construction was started in 975. All this was a part of a huge military mobilization in Denmark at that point.
So even though Harold never actually wrote down why he built all these fortresses, gives us a pretty good idea of what must have motivated him.
Exactly.
Good, let's have a look inside.
Yeah, sure.
They move onto one of the ramparts to get a better view of the site.
On top of the earthwork, you have a sort of wooden...
Yeah, structure.